G'day guys, Socket here. So today we're going to continue on with our Room EQ Wizard car audio tuning tutorial series, and today's episode is how to do time alignment using impulse and phase. So I know a lot of you have been hanging out for this tutorial because impulse and phase alignment is a topic that a lot of people kind of struggle with. Like where on the impulse response do I line things up, and how do I read the phase graphs and stuff like that. And while I'm going to walk you through how I do time alignment using impulse and phase, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about how to use the tools and things, because we've already covered a lot of that ground in previous tutorials, in particular the language of sound tutorial. So if you haven't already watched that, it's full of great technical information. Go back and check that out. I'll put the link down in the description, and then come back here and pick up the tutorial from this kind of point. Without any more sort of introductions, let's get stuck in. Alrighty then, the first thing I'd like to do is just walk you through the steps that I use for this phase and impulse time alignment method. I find this actually a lot quicker and easier to do than the moving mic summation method, and the main reason for that is you're able to take a measurement of your speakers, put that information into REW, do a lot of simulating and stuff in the REW tool, and then go out to the car and just see how it all sounds. So while there's a lot of steps involved, I actually find the whole process a lot easier. So as always, when I'm doing time alignment, I always start with doing the distance measures of the speakers to the listening position. I call it the tape measure method. If you haven't already watched that tutorial, I'll put the link to the description, in the description below. But basically, you're measuring the distance from the speakers to your listening position, and then putting those delays into the DSP. While I would normally do that when I'm doing time alignment, I'm not going to put the delays into the DSP as part of this tutorial, because I want you guys to be able to see each of the raw time measurements and be able to work through the maths without it being complicated by there being delays in the DSP to start with. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. So once you've got your delays into your DSP, the first thing you want to do is just remeasure all of your individual speakers. Now, the reason that I do this is because often your measurements will slightly change. If you've taken a set of measurements, a month ago or a few weeks ago, and you take another measurement today, you'll notice that they might be slightly different. And because we want the information to be as accurate as we can, it's always a good idea just to take a fresh set of measures. Once I've got those measures, the first thing I'm going to do is fix up any problems. So I've got a nice blank canvas to start the time alignment work. So that includes things like making sure that the levels are at the right level. So is my subwoofer, on the house curve, or do I need to lift it up a little bit? Are there bumps and lumps in the speaker response that I want to do some last minute EQ and fix those things up? Because, as we've covered before, if you do any level matching or additional EQ work after you've done your time alignment, they introduce phase issues, they change the phase, and they change the crossover points and will throw aspects of your phase alignment out. So I always say it's a good idea to get all of that stuff locked in stone before you start doing your time alignment work, right? The next thing is you want to check for what I call polarity flips. Now, in the example we got coming up, I've got a few polarity flips, and I'm leaving them in there so you can see what they look like and know how to identify and fix them. But believe me, it's much easier to do your time alignment work if you've got all of your speakers in polarity. And once again, we've covered how to check speaker polarity, and how to sort of listen what it sounds like when things are out of polarity in previous tutorials. So so make sure you get your polarities sorted out before you get into your time alignment. Then if you need to remeasure all your speakers, particularly if you've done some EQ work or whatever. So we've now got a set of individual speakers, and that's just your left tweeter, your right tweeter, left mid, right mid, blah blah blah. And you've got those 8, 10, whatever measurements that you've got. You don't need to measure the crossovers, you don't need to measure speaker pairs. We can simulate all of that stuff in REW. Alright, so from there we move into time and phase aligning the pairs. So I start by getting my tweeters time aligned, and then move to the mids and then the mid bass and sort of down the structure that way. The reason I do it that way is because the impulse response is the sharpest in terms of all of the speakers. It's got the sharpest impulse response, and so you can get a pretty good time alignment and a starting point with your tweeters. Other people work from the subwoofers and work up. Whatever works for you. This is just the way that I do things. Once I've got my pairs all time aligned, I then move to the time aligning and phase aligning the crossovers. I'll show you how to do that, but that's essentially, with the left mid and the left tweeter and the right mid and the right tweeter are interacting, and I work my way down from the tweeters to the mid bass to the to the mid bass sub interaction, right? And then once you've got all those and you've got your delays sorted out, I then put all the delays into the DSP and then take the laptop out to the car, and then I play the each of the pairs of speakers to make sure that the delays are correct, because if they are, you should hear the speakers summing up somewhere in the middle of your dashboard, right? And if they're not, if they're splitting to either side of the car or they're off center, then that indicates you've got a problem, and you can head back in, find out whatever the problem is, and then sort of fix up the delays, and and hopefully your tune is right. I know that when I did this the other day, tweeters were fine, the mid bass were fine, the subs and everything was fine, but the mids just were sort of pulling way to one side of the dashboard, and it turned out to be I had the left and right delays inverted, right? And when I flipped them around to remeasure again, bang, they were in the middle of the dashboard and everything just lined up beautifully. So that's the type of thing I'm talking about in step 10. Finally, there is what I call fine adjustments by ear. So the thing with all of these impulse measures and and all these sweep measures is you've got to be really careful not to get blinded by the graphs and blinded by but the peaks must be all pointing in a certain direction, or it must cross over on an E point or something like that. What you need to realize is the microphone and your microphone doesn't always pick up exactly what your ears hear, and so you're going to have slight variations between a good tune and what you hear and exactly what the things are telling you in the graphs. So, and I'll cover that as we go through the practical parts of this tutorial. So that last bit is just the last few clicks to get it absolutely dialed in, and we sort of applying, I guess, that fine tune by ear. And then once you've done that, your time alignment is complete, and and 95% of your tune is kind of done. So that's the steps that I go through, guys. I know that there are a million different ways that people do this, and that's great. If you found a method that works for you, fantastic. But as I said, with all of these tutorials, I'm just sharing what I've learned and how I go about things. All right, so without further ado, we will move on, and I'll start by heading out to the car to do the speaker measurements. But if you want to skip all of that stuff, then feel free to jump ahead, and I'll see you when we start to use the measurements in REW. Okay guys, so we're going to start off with the first range of measurements, and so this will be with the EQ demo post TA file, and with all the delays turned off, so all the timing at 0 and all the polarities flipped to normal, so that we can work out if there are any polarity problems and all that usual stuff. and we go to the outputs, and we're going to start with the left tweeter, going into REW, and we're going to make sure our measurement window is loopback timing reference, and our timing offset is set to 0. And so I'm just going to call this tweeter sweep, no time alignment, no timing offset, set to 0. Okay, so here we go with our first measurement. So I'm doing 2 repetitions just to try to improve the signal to noise ratio. So that's our first measurement. Excellent. So that's the first tweeter done. Moving to the right tweeter. Alright, so I'll go measure all of these and join you in a minute. Okay, so that's all the measures done. We'll just have a little look at these quickly before I start measuring the pairs and the crossovers. So just really clear selections. We've got the left tweeter and the right tweeter matching up pretty well. We've got the it should be right mid, not. Why have I got that twice? It must be the left mid, and I forgot to change the name, so I'll just fix it up quickly. Left mid and the right mid, and they're matching up pretty well. Left mid bass, right mid bass. Should really fix that a little bit, but it's just a demo, so we'll continue on. Front sub, rear sub. Okay, so everything's looking fine. I'm going to move on and now take the measures of the pairs. So what I'm going to do is go in and select both tweeters. So guys, I did about an hour's worth of measurement, and I measured all the speaker pairs and all the crossovers and inverted all the speakers and did a bunch of things, and then I realized, hey, people probably don't need to watch all of that, and it's totally unnecessary. I mean, by all means, go and do all those measurements if you want, so you've got the actual measurements, but with the individual speaker drivers measured, you can actually simulate inverting the speakers and adding speakers together and all of that type of stuff in REW. So let's go and have a look at that now. So here we are in REW, guys, ready to start doing our time alignment work. Now this assumes that if you had any EQ work or level matching, that you've already done all of that, and you're ready to sort of get cracking. So in this particular little tune, I could have EQ'd out these little bumps here and tried to get this slope, to match a bit better, and maybe lifted this this rear sub up a little bit, so I've got a better bass rise. But I think you guys know how to do all of that EQ work and level matching. We've covered them in previous tutorials, so I'm not going to muck around with all of that stuff today. So what I want to share with you is some of the tools and screens that we're going to be using. So because we have phase and impulse information, unlike when we're using the moving mic method, we can actually use this overlay tool up here, which allows us to, like with the other screens, we can select what we want to see down here, but we can look at, for example, the impulse response of a speaker. So here it is. This is the in this case the left tweeter, and we can bring up the right tweeter in green. What we're seeing here is the sweep sound is creating a peak of sound energy, which is recorded by REW and the mic, and what we're looking for is this peak that is crossing over this this 100 line here and this 100 line down here. You can see all of these peaks and sharp bits, and you could which one do I line against? Well, you're looking for the peak that intersects the 100% mark, right? And so what I can see from this chart, a few things. So first of all, this is one of these speakers is flipped, right? Because this peak is pointing upwards and this peak is pointing downwards. So this would normally indicate normal polarity and this would normally indicate inverted polarity. And what you want is, so you don't have polarity problems, is to actually have both of these peaks pointing up in the same direction, right? Excuse me. The second thing I notice about this particular chart is that the green speaker is arriving before the red speaker, right? So that's the right tweeter signal is reaching the microphone earlier than the red left tweeter, and that's because the left tweeter is further away and the sound has further to travel. And if you measure the distance between let's just zoom in a bit using Control right button and then click. Now we can see those two measures a little bit better, and if you put your line on the cursor and we hold control and the right button, you can pretty much draw a little grid like this, and you can read off the how many milliseconds difference these two speakers are. In this case it's 1.06 milliseconds, right? We don't need to worry about the other numbers because in the helix you can only enter it into 1.06, right? You don't no smaller than that, right? And that's equivalent to 36 centimeters, right, in delay. All right, so that's the impulse window. And when we are time aligning speakers, we try to get these two peaks to overlap, right? And we'll have a look at that a little bit later. So that's certainly one window that we'll be using a lot, which is the impulse window. The second window we'll use a fair bit is the phase window. So same type of thing, you can select what you want to look at here in the phase window. So for example, let's say we're looking at these tweeters again, and anyway, these are the phase plots. The red is the left tweeter, green is the right tweeter, and you can see how the phase is wrapping around. So it's going from 180 degrees through to 0 through to negative 180 degrees. This is one phase cycle. Each line is a phase cycle, and it sort of wraps around like this. And so when we're doing phase alignment, we're aiming to get two speakers with this green line and this red line, for example, to be within 60 degrees of each other, right? Which will give us the maximum summation. And so once again, we'll be spending some time here in the phase window. Right, the next window, well, it's not really a window, it's more of a tool that we'll be using. So we'll just close the overlay and then come back here into All SPL. Is a tool called the Alignment tool, right? And so you go up here to Actions, and you then select Alignment tool, and then we can close this. So we're going to be using this a fair bit in the time alignment process for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can align your you can see a display of your frequency response to your speakers. So let's say, for example, I'm looking at the left tweeter and the right tweeter. Okay, so what you can see here is the green and the red tweeters. Then the black line is how those two tweeters are summing together, and the dotted line is the maximum theoretical summation that you could possibly get, right? So this gives you some really good information about what's happening with the two speakers, and will help us to as we add delay, we can see the speaker line moving around, wiggling about, and that will help us, I guess, eyeball, for want of a better term, and time align our speaker pairs or our speaker crossovers, right? So we're going to be using this tool a fair bit. The other great thing about this tool is you can either display at the bottom here the phase graph for these two speakers or the impulse for these two speakers. And so once again, if you've got two speakers, for example, and you can literally use these delay buttons to line them up over the top of each other, right? Not a very good example, but you will see a little later when we get into the actual time aligning exercise, how we make use of this very powerful tool. So they're probably the key things that we'll be using in today's tutorial. And so let's get on, and we're going to start with the speaker pairs, starting with the tweeters. Okay, so we're going to start by clearing everything out and bringing up our left and right tweeter. And yes, I could have EQ'd this a little bit more, but hey, it's a demo, so I'm not going to worry too much. So the idea here is we want to get the best summation that we can by time aligning these two speakers. And so we're going to start by going into the time alignment tool. So we click on Actions, Alignment tool. We can then close this action thing just to make a bit more space. And so let me just explain a little bit more about this tool. So basically we have a top section and a bottom section, and then this panel on the right. And I'll just run through the tool very quickly. So in this case, we're going to want to time align two speakers. It happens to be a left tweeter and a right tweeter. Now you always put the speaker that is furthest away from you in the top, and the one that's closest to you at the bottom. And the reason for that is this is where you can play with the delays and the timing and things, and you always want to add delay to the speaker that is closest to you. Okay, so because I'm in a right-hand drive car, the speaker that is furthest away is the left tweeter, and the speaker that I'm going to time align against is the right tweeter. So the right tweeter always goes down, the speaker that's closest to you always goes to the bottom, because that's the one that we want to add delay to. Now you can add level, gain. We really don't want to do that because we're time aligning, not doing level matching. And then you have this delay. You can add delay here. You can add it in half millisecond increments by just highlighting this middle button and then using the arrow keys on your keyboard to click left and right. Okay, and then you have a fine adjustment delay where you can add 0.01 of a millisecond either way. So just highlight the little thing and whatever, left and right. And so you have a coarse and a fine delay, and you can just blank back to zero just by highlighting and clearing that out, and getting back to your starting position, right? So that's this part of the panel. The second part of the panel is this thing called align copy, right? So for example, as I said before, you don't need to go out and measure the left tweeter with a polarity inversion if you don't want to. You can literally come here and click on invert polarity, and then this left tweeter will have negative polarity on it now, and then if you want to make a copy of that, you can hit align copy and it will drop that measurement down here. So what I basically have here is the left tweeter with polarity inverted, right? And so I now have the left tweeter measurement with normal polarity and a left tweeter measurement with inverted polarity, just by doing that. And I can do that to either the speaker in slot 1 or the speaker in slot 2. If, for example, I've added some delay like this, right, 13 milliseconds for some crazy reason, and I want to make a copy of the right tweeter with this delay in it, once again, I can just hit align copy. It will drop a copy down here, and I'll have right tweeter with 13.5 milliseconds of delay, right? So I have my right tweeter with no delay and my right tweeter with delay added. And so we're going to use align copy a fair bit to create new measurements using the REW simulator. The next part of the tool is for switching between impulse and phase. Alright, so we can do that. We can change the smoothing to whatever it is that we want from this panel too. I tend to just leave it on 1/6 smoothing. you can get rid of this bottom pane and get more real estate by clicking on this little check mark here. Okay. And then these other buttons down here are used mainly for doing phase alignment in the phase window, and I'll talk about them later. And then the other button that we'll have here is called Align Sum. So what that will do is create a measurement as if you were measuring the left and these two speakers together, right? In this case, the left and the right tweeter. So if I click that, I will get a sum of the left and the right tweeter. Right tweeter sum. Okay. And so if I go back into the main screen again, I close that alignment tool. Here we had these new measures down here. So, I've got the left tweeter that doesn't look any different because a phase inversion doesn't change the frequency response. I've got the right tweeter with delay added. Once again, it doesn't change the frequency response because it looks the same. And I have now a blue measure called the sum of the two, right? Of the two measures that I had in the alignment tool, right? So while these measures don't look any different, it's because under the hood, when we're looking at the phase and the impulse, these will look different. And so let me just give you a quick example. So if we go up into the overlays, and we'll go to, let's go impulse first, and just open all that up, clear that out. So here are the original impulses, the left and the right. And then if we look at the left inverted, so the left one is the red one, and we look at now we have the blue one with the spike poking up. So an inversion flips the impulse response shape. And then if you look at the right, where we added on a massive amount of delay here, and it's so big it's actually moved it off the screen, and I'll just turn that off and we'll see if we can go and find it. Oh, there it is. Alright, there we go. So you can see that it's moved the impulse response 13 milliseconds in delay, right? It's moved it to the right. Okay, so that's the impulse. That's how things look in the impulse graph. If we go to the phase graph and once again have a bit of a look, this is the left. If we do an inversion, it changes the phase by giving us a mirror image of the phase wraps. If we look at the right tweeter and we look at adding delay, you can see it changes all the phase wraps as well. So that is just a very quick look at I guess the tools that we're using, and particularly the alignment tool and the effect it has under the bonnet in terms of phase and impulse. Alright, so let's get rid of these practice measures and let's start doing the alignment of the tweeter and the tweeter pairs. So let's bring up the left and right tweeter, and we'll go up into the alignment tool, and we want the left tweeter on the top because it's the furthest one away, and the right tweeter on the bottom because it's the one that we want to add delay to. And you can see, as I said before, the speaker response and then the impulse response here. Now we could align things here by just adding delay. You can see the green one starting to move, and we can just put it over the top of each other. But before we do that, I just want to take you into the impulse window because you guys will be able to see it a lot easier from there. So we're going to go into overlays, select impulse, and let's just bring up a measure. So let me explain what's going on. If you're not across how impulse responses work, we'll be really quick. So the sound wave from the sweep from REW is traveling, so time goes from here to here, right? 0, T0 and 3.5 milliseconds, 7 milliseconds, etc. So here comes the sound wave, and it hits the microphone, and the microphone picks up the sound wave and responds, right, and vibrates and all that stuff, right? And so this big peak that crosses over the 100 threshold, either this end or this end, is what we call the impulse response, right? And then all these other peaks and jaggeries and other things are reflections and echoes and signals arriving late because it's bounced off the windscreen or whatever, right? But because tweeters are high frequency drivers and the wavelengths are very small, we get a very sharp and defined impulse response, which allows us to take two of them, like our left and our right one here, and overlay them so we can, basically time align our speakers using impulse response. So this works particularly well with tweeters. Now, the first thing that we should notice is that there's a whole bunch of other little peaks. They are not the ones that you want to align to, and nor do you want to align to the knee of a speaker, particularly a tweeter. It's this point where it crosses over 100% that you want to align to. So at the moment we have one of these pointing up, which indicates this speaker is positive polarity, and one of these peaks pointing down, which indicates negative polarity. It is not true to look at the first, if I zoom in here, this one's sort of bouncing around all over the place, and you would look at that and say, oh, well, that first peak is pointing up, therefore it's positive. Don't be fooled. That's not the way to read these charts, right? It's you're always looking for this peak that is crossing over the 100 mark. Okay, so essentially we'll bring up the right and left tweeter, and the first thing we need to do is flip one of these speakers around. It could be the left, it could be the right, we're not sure which one it is, but just to save time, I already know that it's the right hand speaker, so we're going to go and do a polarity flip. So we'll close this, and here in the alignment tool we're going to select the right speaker and create a measurement of the right speaker with a polarity flip. So click invert polarity, hit assign copy, and before anything else make sure you name it. So right tweeter, polarity inverted, right? And then what that means is we can now either delete the original measurement. I wouldn't recommend this, but to keep things neat, what I normally do is delete the measurement and then replace it with a new measure. Either way, we're going to now, instead of selecting the old measurement, which is number 2, we're going to go down there and select measurement 9. All right. In fact, I will do that because it's just the way I do things. So let's just get rid of that. And then I'm going to move by hold and dragging this up into its old position, so it's now measurement 2, right? And I've locked in the changes as I'm making them. Which reminds me, always save a backup copy of these measurements, guys, because you're working with your data, and if you muck it up, then it's lost, right? So always work on a copy of your measurements. Okay, so if we go back into the overlays, and I'll blow that up again, now we can see that we've got the right tweeter and the left tweeter, and the polarity are both pointing down now. So they're both speakers are in polarity, as they say. Now, what we know is that the speaker over here is arriving, or the sound is arriving to the speaker before this red speaker, right? And that makes sense because the right speaker is closer, so it's going to register the sound wave. The sound wave from the left speaker is going to take longer to travel to the mic than the right hand speaker, so that makes sense. So when you add delay, your speaker over here is going to always move to the right. If you take delay off, your speaker response will move to the left. Okay. So what we want to do is figure out, well, how much delay do we need to add to this speaker to line these two impulse responses up? Now, probably the easiest way to do that is zoom right on in. Put your cursor on the point of the line, and you can either, this reads 3.206 milliseconds, right? So you can either write that down on a bit of paper, or the other way to do it is to control right click, drag a little box like that, and you can see here it'll give you the answer. So this is 1.06 milliseconds between these 2 points. So we're going to use that as our delay, and we're going to go back into the alignment tool and put in 1.06 milliseconds. Okay, and we can see straight away that these two here on our little impulse chart have lined up, and we're going to create a new measurement with that delay in it. So we're going to align copy. So this is now right tweeter inverse polarity with plus 1.06 milliseconds of delay. So I'm going to get rid of that measurement and I'm going to slide that one up. That's my new right tweeter measurement, and I can select it again. So let's go and have a look what the results were, right? So we can go back into overlays, scroll out a little bit. Okay, so now we have the left tweeter and the right tweeter completely aligned. Right? I can zoom right in and you can see, well, okay, they are not exactly aligned, but they are. Can we even measure that? It's, boy, 0.7 of a microsecond, so 0.7 of a millionth of a second. So it's crazy how much you can zoom in, but they are time aligned, right? Those two speakers. All right, so we can close that down, and we can now have a look at what's happened with the summed response. So if we're back into our all SPL, well, actually, we want to go back into the alignment tool, and with we've got our left speaker and we've got our right tweeter with the inverse polarity and plus 1.06 of delay. You can hit align copy, and oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. My apologies. We're looking at the sum. All right, sorry guys. You can hit align sum and it will add these two responses together. So this is now the tweeter sum, and we can now go and have a look at what that looks like by selecting it here. And once again, what a terrible color. Let's make it a nice bright blue. That's a bit better. And so let's just zoom in a little bit so we can see it a bit better. So you can see here that this is summing up all through here, certainly summing up all through here, kind of crossing over a little bit there, but that is the two speakers time aligned. If I go back into the alignment tool and we have a look at, I'll just turn that off so we can get full screen, we can see the dotted line is the theoretical maximum summation that we could get. If we actually, let's say, went backwards and inverted our polarity and took off 1.06 seconds, and then we you can see that this black line looks much worse, right? So if I take that out again, you can see it's improved, right? So that is our two tweeters time aligned. So what we would do next is we would go into the DSP and sorry, I'm just going to have to open this up. Bear with me a second. Right, start demo, etc., etc. You've all done this before. So we'd go into our time alignment section. Now my tweeters, left and right tweeter up here. Make sure we're in delay mode. Now I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to set everything to 10 milliseconds, and I'll explain why. So I'm going to put everything in group 5, slide all of this over to 10 milliseconds, and the reason for that is sometimes I'm going to have to take delay off. So this allows me to either add delay or take delay off without mucking everything around, right? So now I'm going to put everything back into sort of unlinked, except my subs that I'm going to leave in 4 and 5, right? Okay, so we said we want 1.06 milliseconds added to the right tweeter, so we're going to go to 11.06. Oops. And right, that's the two tweeters aligned. So I'm now going to put them into group 1, and that means that I can move these, but that relationship is not going to be spoiled, right? Great. So that's the tweeters done. Now, if you like, you could pop out to the car, play correlated pink noise with your 2 tweeters playing, just to check this timing. And what you should find is that you'll hear the pink noise sort of in your car, everywhere, but it will be most concentrated in the middle of the dashboard, right? And if this time alignment is correct. If it's not, and it's somewhere else in the car pulling way to the left or to the right or something, then there's clearly something wrong. Come back and have another go. Alright, with the tweeters done, we can then move that up to there, and we can move on to our mids. So we'll have our left mid and our right mid, and once again we'll open up the action panel, the alignment tool, close that down now. And once again we need to select the speakers that we want to measure together, so the left mid and the right mid, because the right mid is closest, it's down the bottom. And here we have once again the speakers, so the right mid in orange, the left mid in blue, the dotted line that shows you the theoretical maximum summation you can get, and then how the 2 speakers are summing together. And we can see that it's cancelling here, so it'll either be above the line, on the line, or below the line. They're the 3 states that you'll find the summation in, and you can see that it's below the line here, so it's cancelling, it's summing up over here, cancelling out, so it's all over the shop. And so what this indicates is that we have a polarity flip with massive cancellations everywhere. In fact, we can test that out just by quickly clicking invert polarity there, and boom, you can see all this kind of sums up now, right? So we know we have a polarity problem. So once again, we're not sure whether it's the left or the right polarity, but anyway, so what we'll do is just create a copy of the right mid with the polarity flipped. So we just hit align copy. So here, as always, we change the name as soon as we do it so we don't forget. So our right mid is now inverted, so we can get rid of the original and put the right mid in its place. Okay, so we want left mid and we want the new right mid. Alright, so now we have the polarity inversion in place. Now the next question is, well, okay, we did time alignment by using the alignment tool before, the impulse response. So let's go and have a quick look at the overlays and check out the impulse response for these two mid drivers, right? So mid and mid. Scroll that down a little bit, and let's just look at one. So the first thing that you will notice is that it's not as clean, as sharp as the tweeter. So we've got once again we've got the impulse response is this one because it crosses over at the 100% mark. We've got this kind of thing going on. Anyway, it's all a bit jaggery, and we've got the right mid, which is this green one. Now, once again, the shapes are very different, right? This one's got, a double fork thing going on here. So if we have a look at that, this one doesn't. And so, but once again, this one almost gets to 100, like it's at 90, 87 or something. And this one, these two are at 100. So if you were trying to figure out which peak of this green one to select, do you align to this one or this one, then this is the peak here that we would be using, and we'd want to try to align it to this peak here on the mid. And so the green one's arriving first, which is the right hand mid. Once again, we could measure it by doing this, right? So that looks like 100 milliseconds, or microseconds I should say. It's not out by very much at all. Yep. Let's call it 110 milliseconds, right, which is 0.11 milliseconds. So we can go back into our alignment tool and put in, 0.11 milliseconds, and you can see that has changed the chart. And this is probably a good time to just give you a quick lesson on how I use this chart for aligning stuff. So as I said, we have our I'll just get rid of that and get back to 0. We have this coarse adjustment and we have a fine adjustment. So what I typically do is, and I'll just use this as an example. So when you hold down and add delay, you'll see, just watch this side of the summation, right? You'll see the lumps are getting, or the waves are getting more frequent, right? And if I go the other way, the waves are getting less frequent. Okay, and at some point they kind of slow down and then almost line up with the line, if that kind of makes sense. You'll see it happen in a minute. So what's happening here is, as you're adding delay to the right hand mid, it's affecting the entire frequency range, right? You're adding delay to all of these frequencies, but because all the frequencies have different cycle times and things, their phase is changing at different rates, okay? And so when you add delay, you basically, the summation line just wiggles all over the place, right? So you can see here as I add delay on, it lines up, really well here. If I keep taking delay off, it gets worse. Then it'll start sort of wrapping. Right? It gets even worse. So I'm clearly going in the wrong direction, right? It's not getting any better. If I go this way, you can see that it's starting to approach that maximum line on the left. And, I kind of get to there, here somewhere. And this part of the chart is, pretty much maxed out, right? This part's looking terrible, but, I can keep going. And, and at some point, I get to the point where on this left side of the chart, I sort of get over the maximum point and it starts to fall away, right? So the idea with, if you're trying to eyeball it, is to try to get to a point where you've got not necessarily the maximum summation across the entire speaker, but you've got the best compromise, right? So if we go and add in our 0.011, which we got from our impulse response, you can see that it's pretty maxed out here. It's not so good through here, but it's certainly not big cancellations, and it's summing up okay through there. So it's probably not a million miles away, right? And you can play with this fine adjustment to see whether you can actually improve the line any better, right? So, back and forth. But anyway, you'll see a little bit more about how we use that later. But, I can fiddle around. I've got 0.11, 0.16. I can just try to get it as evenly distributed as I can, right? And then the second thing I can do is, if I've got it on 0.11 as I had before, which is what the impulse thing was trying to tell me, right? And then I can see down here on the impulse chart, let me just add a bit more delay, you'll see it move. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, there's the green one moving left and right when I put in coarse delay. But you can see those two down the bottom here are on top of each other, right? If I do that. And if we go into the overlays and check the overlay window, oops, they are super zoomed in. Oh. Sure enough, these peaks are pretty damn close, right? 106 microseconds, right? You might add another 0.1 and sort of nail it, right? The other thing you can do is go and have a look in the phase graphs. Now you can do things like estimate IR delay to sort of flatten these phase graphs and things out. I'm just try to keep things super simple. So we know that our speakers are playing. Sorry, let's go into overlays again. SPL. Just open that up, clear those out, put in the mid and the other mid. So we know that these speakers are playing a range from something like 60 through to 7 or 8,000, right? That's the range that we're interested in, right? So when we go into phase, we're going to want to sort of look at this area. This area here, from 60 through to 7,000, right? And there's a lot of phase wraps in there. Okay, so we can get rid of that. We can get rid of the tweeters, and we can just look at the two mids. So what you can see is we want these two lines to be 60 degrees away from each other at a maximum. So you can see these ones are pretty much on top of each other between 100 and 250 hertz. They're pretty much on top of each other. And so if we go back in and look at the SPL, sorry, not the SPL, the summation here, between 100 and 200, you can see it's running along the maximum line, right? That's where those two phase lines were lined up. And where it starts to separate, right, this black line and the dotted line here, which shows that it's not quite reaching maximum summation, and we go back into the phase line again, from 200 through to 500-600, you can see the phase is not as close as over here between 100 and 200 hertz, and that's why you're getting less summation, because there is a difference in the phase graph. Now the way that you read this is, for example, if you want to tell the difference between the two, I'm going to put this on 0 phase, and at 299 I've got 60 degrees of phase difference, 60 versus 0, right? So that's about as far apart as you want them to be. Now if I go into the alignment tool and we switch from impulse to phase, now what we can do is we can add delay or take delay off, and you will see the phase lines getting closer and further apart. So let's just have a look at what's happening here at this 400 to 600 mark. This area up here, right? As I add phase or take phase away, you will see the phase graphs, the phase moving apart, or those phase lines, and you'll see the summation in those areas sort of drop. And then as I add delay on, and the phase wraps get closer together and they get to the point where they're on top of each other, we get maximum summation through here, right? So that's how the phase graph relates to summation, and how you can use the alignment tool here to align your phases. Now keep in mind that you will not unless you're extremely lucky and all of your phase is running at a particular angle or slope, and you see these are similar and they're similar and they're similar, but these are not, right? This one's going that way and this one's going that way. You cannot get all of them to be totally on top of each other, right? It's near impossible. But what you can do is, I can get this one super close and this one, at the compromising this end, right? So what we're looking at here is this 600 mark. If I want that to be more summed, I'm happy to sacrifice something over here, then I'm just moving my phase around until I got a good compromise. Having it on top of each other is not always the best option, right? Actually finding that little sweet spot where you're sort of sharing that 60 degrees of the nice 60 degrees love zone, or whatever you want to call it, right? Sometimes you've got to share it across a number of phase wraps. So, just having this one maxed out may not give you the best result across your entire speaker. So what would I use here? I would start with 0.001 as per our impulse as a starting point. You can see the phase is pretty well aligned through here. This is kind of down on the slopes, so this is the area that's playing most of the volume, not down on the side of the crossover slopes. So I kind of want to max this area out if I can. So I might add some delay to see if I can get sacrifice some of this stuff on the slopes to get more summation through here. As I add delay, as I'm adding delay here, it's starting to affect this area, so that's not great. I can just keep playing around with that, and I might get to something like, I don't know, something like that, maybe 109, 110, where okay, this is not as summed up as it used to be, but this is kind of flat through this area, and it's kind of summing up better than it was, and I've still got some summation through here. So it's just like I said, you can see your phase lines are still within, what's that, 0 and 60 degrees, right on the cusp there. That's about as far as I could go. This is still 0 to 59. This is 0 to 47. So I probably stretched it as far as I can, but so I'd have a delay of something like maybe not that much. Anyway, you just have a play around with it until you are comfortable with you've got the best compromise, right? But so once you're happy, once again you need to hit align copy to make a new copy with the delays added. And so now I've got the right mid bass, which is inverted with plus 0.93 milliseconds of delay, and I'm happy with that. So I can get rid of the old measure and put the new measure in its place. And once again, left mid and the right mid. Okay, now it's got the delay in there, we've got all of our new measures. So before I was talking about earlier in the video about not being super focused on getting everything right according to the graphs, and so this is a good example. So what we've done here is we've made a compromise between the summation across the entire range of this speaker, because it's playing from 100 hertz, 200 hertz, all the way up to 4,000 or 5,000, and most of the sound spectrum in your car, and so that's a big ask to be level maximum summation across that entire span. So we've made a compromise and we've decided that 0.93 milliseconds of delay gives us a good compromise, both in terms of our phase and our summation. But what it means is if we go up and change this to impulse, and I'm going to change that color again, sorry guys, to red, you can see that the two impulse peaks no longer line up. And this is what I was talking about before. A lot of people would say, well, this has got to line up, right? If it's not lining up, then this is terrible, right? It can't be time aligned. And I guess that was my point earlier, is yes, ideally under ideal conditions, your phase, your impulse and your summation would all line up, and if there were no reflections and other things going on and your speakers were all absolutely installed perfectly, then you would sum up 6 dB right across that entire mid, and these things would be completely aligned, and your phase would be on top of each other all the way through the spectrum. And it just, in my experience, let's be practical, it doesn't always work that way. So don't be too stressed about it. Really, at the end of the day, the measurements are just that, measurements. you need to listen to this and see whether it's summing up in the middle of your car or not. So I just want to put this to bed once and for all. The graphs and the phase and the summation, you need to use all of this information to guide your decisions when it comes to doing time alignment. But time alignment is not as simple as just jumping into the overlays and bringing up the phase and getting the phase to match at that point, right? Or going into the impulse and getting these 2 points to line up. Yes, you can do it that way, and that's the way a lot of people do it. But you will probably end up with a suboptimal tune because getting proper time alignment is about using all of this information and finding the right compromise between and the right balance between these three things, because our cars and our car environments are not the perfect environment and they don't cause summation. And I know these comments are going to cause some people to have a lot of distress, but I'm just sharing my experience with you guys. I want you to have the best tune that you possibly can, so do not stress too much that these two impulse responses aren't really working. Go out to the car and listen to it, and if it sounds terrible, then go and change it until it sounds good. That's all I can say. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's move on. Alright, so next we want to go and put that delay into the DSP, so 0.93 on the right mid. So that's going to take it up to 0.93, so 10.93. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to lock that into group 2 so that that relationship is not changed. So now we move on to the next speaker pair, which will be the mid bass. So get rid of those two, bring up the left and the right mid bass. Here they are. Aren't they pretty? Once again, I could have probably done some EQ work to sort of fix up these two slopes, but not too bad. Alright, so before we jump into the alignment tool, I'll show you a different way of getting the summation of these two speakers. So one is to go into actions, and you can use this thing here called trace arithmetic, and then pick the two speakers that you want to sum up, A plus B, and so that's measurement 6 and measurement 7, right? This is just another way of generating the sum. And what we can see here is the purple line is the sum of the two. So this is the mid bass sum. Oh, and you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to actually calculate the sum of the two mids that we just finished. So what I will do is we'll just use the same tool and just do the mids quickly, left mid and the right mid. There it is, and generate that and call that mid sum. Put that back up there so we've got a copy of that for later. Alright, so back to our mid bass. So clearly what's going on here is these two are not aligning, and so if we want to go check their polarity, we can go into the overlays, into impulse, get rid of all of that and bring up the left mid bass and the right mid bass, and I'm going to hit fit to data, and you'll see what it does. It actually creates a much, well, here's the timeline, hundreds of milliseconds, but squashes that scale all the way in, and then I can open it up like this. Now once again we're looking for the peaks that are crossing over the 100 line. This is getting close, this is getting close, but no cigar. They are actually over here, right? So 100 and 100, right? So this would say to me that these two speakers are in the right polarity. If I look down here, I can see this peak's going up and this peak's going down, which some people would say indicates the incorrect polarity. But what I suspect that they are out of polarity, because if we go down here and let's bring up our alignment tool, and we want the left mid base and the right mid base, and we always put, in our case, the right hand drive cars, the speaker that is closest to us, on the bottom. Okay, so here we have the blue and green left and right mid base, the summation and the maximum possibility. If I flip the polarity on one, I can see I get much better summation through here. And if I play with the gain, whoops, that's a bit too much. Just highlight the center and use your arrow keys. I can see that if I add on, if I go this direction, if I go the other direction, it gets worse. Right? And you can see that if I keep, let's just start here. If I keep taking delay off, you'll see on the right hand side I get more and more waves. Look at them. So multiple waves means I'm far away from my time alignment, right? I need to go in the other direction. So I'll go into the other direction and you'll see the waves are getting less and less and less, and to get to the point where I think it's sort of one big wave and then it's almost bouncing into position, right? And if I keep going further, it will start creating additional waves, right? So I know that my time alignment, my perfect time alignment, is kind of somewhere where it flashes into position here. So it's going to be around the positive 150 mark, right? With the polarity flipped. Let's say I just use my fine tool alignment now, and I can now go back and forth to see. Once again, I'm getting multiple waves down the bottom. It's all falling apart, so I'm going in the wrong direction. I go the other way. It's starting to straighten out, and now it's starting to fall apart again. I'm getting gaps up here. So, the best result I can get is around about here somewhere, right? 120, 121, something like that. Getting a little bit of, but that's pretty good, right? Summed up maximum all the way through there, just through this crossover at around about 250. Okay, do I want to, do I want to improve that little area there at the expense of something else? Right? At the expense of, through here? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. So this is, you need to make a bit of a call. I personally think that, 123, something like that, is probably a pretty good result. Now, if I take this polarity, so that says to me that if I look at these two impulse responses down here, they're kind of following each other, which tells me that that this feels like I need a polarity flip, even though the chart over here told me that I don't, right? Feels pretty much like I do, right? These are looking pretty close now. And so if I take this polarity flip off, it all falls apart, right? Now let me see if I can get the same type of response just by doing what I did before. So going back and forth with the fines. So it's kind of setting up there. Now it's creating lots of waves, so I'm going the wrong way. Oh, it's creating, it's bouncing all over the place. So that bounce, boink, right, that big bounce is about there. So that's 5 milliseconds of delay, which is quite a lot, right? If I go the other way, it doesn't work. If I try to get some fine tuning, it also doesn't kind of work. So how do I know whether I've got the polarity right or not? And the answer to that is because when I do it one way, I will get a pretty good match. When I do it the other way, yes, it will sum up, but it's nowhere near as good as when I had the polarity flipped, right? So I'm going to put that back, and I'm going to go to, I think it was 123, right? So for, I think that's probably the best result that I'm going to get. And now I can go and check, whoops, where did it go? Actions. Let's go and create a measure with that in there. So right mid base, align copy. So this is going to be my right mid base with polarity inverted with 1.23 milliseconds of delay. And it's positive, right? Positive delay. turn that off. And now let's go and see. Well, hang on, sorry, I want to get rid of that one and bring in the new measure. And let's go into the overlays and see what we have. So here we are in the impulse, and my gosh, what have we got? We got the mid bass in. That's better. Both of them are green, so I'm going to make one red. Haha. Alright, back into overlays. Okay, so now we've got these impulse polarity flips, and now the impulse is looking better, and it's certainly looking more aligned. But you will notice that the green 100 and the red 100 are still flipped. But, you know, if I ignore that 100 rule and I just look at these two, right, they're pretty damn close, right? That's, what have we got? 189 microseconds, right? 189 millionths of a second. That's pretty lined up to me. And okay, so now let's look at the phase. Now, oops, before I do that, let's have a look at the operating range of this speaker. So it's running from about 40 hertz, go away, 40 hertz through to about 400. So that's the phase area that we want to look at. Not interested in all this stuff up here. And let's turn on the right speakers that we're looking at. So right mid bass and the left mid bass. And we want to go from, I think we said 40 hertz to 400, something like that. So control, draw a line. Right, bang. Wow, look at that. It's perfectly lined up through here, and there's a bit of craziness going on because that's the slope on the side where there's a bit of a twist going on. But even, you know, through that region, it's pretty lined up. Like, so, you know, looking at the impulse, looking at the phase, is just confirming that we've picked the right polarity and the right timing for the speaker. So, not sure what's happened here. Hello. Hello, you back? No, we've got the we've got the tweeter selected again. Left mid bass, right mid bass. There it is. Okay. Now we're good. Left mid bass, right mid bass, not right mid. Thank you very much. Now we're good. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I would now take that value of 1.23 and add that to the DSP. So here we go. Find the left mid bass, 1.23, which is 11.23. Bang. All right, so we'll lock that into group 3, and we've got all of our speaker pairs time aligned, right? So that means that what I would normally do at this point before I would move on is just go out to the car with those values, put them into the DSP, play correlated pink noise with the tweeters playing, check if it's in the middle, do the same for the mids, do the same for the mid bass, and if they're all kind of centered, you know, the pink noise is concentrated somewhere in the central area of the dash, then I would go, well, that's, you know, those three things are time aligned. If not, then there's a problem somewhere. Now, it's very easy to get mixed up or copy the make a copy of the wrong measurement or something like that, but something's gone wrong, right? Just backtrack, start again, reload your old file if you need to. Yep, it's easy to make mistakes with this. All right, with our speaker pairs done, we're now going to move over to the speaker crossovers. All right, so let's move on to the step 8, which is time aligning, phase aligning the speaker crossovers. So, you know, a crossover is the interaction of two speakers where they're basically playing the same notes. So, for example, if I bring up, I don't know, the right tweeter and the right mid, you know, we can see that you know, here in the red zone, it's mainly coming from the mid, and if I get to this point, then both speakers are playing it. So it's this crossover region, and what we're looking for is when both speakers are time aligned, we should get, you know, the summation running through this area from the crossover point at a maximum of 6 dB up. So if this is 75, you know, we're looking for, you know, the line to be running through this kind of area here around about 81 to indicate, you know, 6 dB of summation and perfect time alignment, right? So we can also see this in the alignment tool. So actions, alignment, just close that for a second, and we want to select the right tweeter and the right mid. And okay, so breaking my own rule here, we always want the closest speaker down the bottom. In my case is the right tweeter, so let me switch those around. It's very easy to add delay to the wrong speaker, and yep, okay, so that's looking a bit better. So here in the display over here, we can see the red mid, the green tweeter, and the dotted line shows the maximum summation, and then the black line showing the summation that we actually have. And so you know, once again, I can use the fine tuning tool to add half a delay at a time, right? And you can see that I'm getting more and more wraps. The more wraps that I get, the further away from time alignment that I actually am, right? So I know I'm going in the wrong direction. I'm looking for that where it turns into one wrap and bang, it jumps into position, right? So that's at, according to this on the course adjustment, 1 millisecond, right? If I keep going the other way, you will see, right, it's creating more and more wraps. I'm definitely going in the wrong direction, right? So let me go back to 0, and let's just see if when I actually add 0.1 of a millisecond, so just adding fine delay, watch what happens. 1, right, so small amounts of delay for tweeters actually cause a lot of movement, right? So, right, bounce, oh, see how it bounced into position there? I'll do that again, it's going the other way. You can see it starting to wrap, more bounces, more wraps, so definitely going the wrong way now. At some point it'll kind of flatten out, but not really. Okay, and you could probably measure that. You could do some measurements and go, oh, you know, I've got how much? I've got 78. I've got, you know, 75 to 70. I've got 3 dB of summation. Well, it's just because your time alignment's not time aligned properly yet, right? So I'm going to go the other way. Just watch what happens, right? Wriggle, and now it's starting to fewer peaks, right? Bam, right? And if you go too far, right, bang. It's kind of lining up there, but on these shoulders it's not really lined up. So that one is lined up, right? If I keep going the other way, once again it's close but not lined up. So you get probably 2 or 3 of these bounces, right? So you know when you're close to getting summation, right? That's summed. If I flip the polarity, I should get maximum a maximum polarity flip, right? And that is at a delay of 1.01 delay for the right tweeter and right mid. So you know, that's the way that you can use this tool to find the exact summation point, right? And you know, if I just change this quickly, we look at the let's do the mid bass, right? Left mid bass with the left mid. Okay, so here we have the crossover again. So you can see the left mid bass and the blue, the left mid, and there is the ideal summation, and here is the other line showing where we're up to, you know, and I can once again coarsely change that, Right, I know that. Well, that's getting close, right? That's a long way away, right? I'm getting lots and lots of wraps. I'm getting lots of wrinkles here, right? That's going the wrong way. Go the other way, right? Wrinkle, wrinkle, wrinkle. So that's using the coarse. It'll give you a rough idea which way you're going in. But if I go back to the fine adjustment and I just keep adding delay, right? Okay. It reacts a lot slower because we're down, using the other speakers now. But you can see now I'm up to sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little wraps going on. So I'm definitely going in the wrong direction. I want that to straighten out. Here we go. Now I've got 1 or 2. Now I've got 1 and bang. Right. That's probably as good as I'm going to get. Now, it's not perfect over here. It's not perfect over there. You can tell the crossover because, it's from this point to this point. Okay. And what you're looking for is maximum summation through this region if you can get it, right? So between the left mid and the left mid bass, I'd be looking at a delay of 0.65. Right, now let me just make a copy of that quickly. A line copy and a line copy. I'll get rid of them because I'll do this all properly. I'm just demonstrating how to use the tool here, guys. Right, so that's left mid sweep with 0.65, no polarity wrap or anything like that. Positive, so I don't get mixed up, and the left mid bass is the same as before. We haven't made any changes. Okay, so let's bring up the overlays and let's have a quick look at those measurements. So clear selections. So I've got the left mid and the left mid bass. Okay, and the crossover point that we are playing around with, if I just bring those up, left mid bass, left mid, so the crossover frequency is 197. Okay, if I go and look in the alignment tool, I can see that the crossover ranges from about 100 through to about 300. So that's the range I really want to be as close as I possibly can. So if I go into the overlays, open this up, I'm in phase now. I've got those two measures, 12 and 13 selected, and I want to go from, what do we say, 100 to 300, right? 100 to 300, something like that, right? And you can see that, okay, well, they could be closer. This is pretty close. At that crossover range of 200, we are, it's right in the middle of a phase wrap, but, we're maybe, what's that, 168 versus 170, so like within 10 degrees of each other. So that's perfectly fine. It sort of unravels a bit here at 109, and that's why when we look at the when we look over here, we're not getting as good a summation because the phase is separating, right? And the phase is separating here, around about the 280 mark, right? Let's go and have a look at that. 280 mark, yes, okay, that's where it's opening up. That's why we're getting less summation. But through the crossover, it's okay. If we go back to our alignment tool again and I put on the phase window, and we can see those wraps down here between 100 and 400, I think 300 we were talking about, okay. And I start adding on delay, right, you'll see the phase starting to open and close, right? And our summation is changing over here as well. So, I'm using, I guess, the phase and the impulse charts to confirm or double sense check, 0.69 I think it was, yep. To really confirm, what I'm seeing here. I'm trying to get the best summation here, and then I'm going back and checking the phase and going, oh yeah, that looks all right, okay, it's probably as good as I'm going to get. Or if I then go into the overlays and then go into impulse, right, and it's hard to compare these two. In fact, I just need to select the right measures. So the left mid bass and the left mid, you can see that when it comes to these type of comparative measures, it's much more difficult because they're two completely different different speakers with different responses. But these peaks at 100% are not aligned, right? But I shouldn't be too concerned about that because the phase is fine and the summation is fine. And what I really need to do is go out to the car and listen to that and see that it's summing up, right? Okay, so that's a quick rundown of how to use the tool to do your crossover alignments. Now I'm going to break this tutorial into two parts, otherwise it's going to get way too long. So what I'll do is continue on in the second part with the doing all of the demonstration of how you timeline all of the crossovers and how we pull all of the timing things together as a final time aligned tune. So guys, thanks very much for sticking through another very long video. I hope that you found that really interesting and it gives you some ideas to improve your time alignment or have a look at your technique. But once again, thanks guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode.